What is happening, everybody? It is UFC 300 this week. So myself and Brady here from DFS by the Numbers, we're going to be breaking down the slate, letting you guys know some of the core plays to be looking at over on Draftkings for this week. If you can do us a favor as you're watching, like the video and subscribe to both our YouTube channels, the Stochastic YouTube channel, as well as DFS by the Numbers. And yeah, it should be an incredible fight card, one of the better ones we've seen in UFC history. I mean, 299 was also fantastic. So some really, really strong pay-per-view events. And Brady, anything special you're going to be doing for UFC 300?
Not entirely. Just having a watch party with my friends and again my brother and that's about it. But yeah, it's gonna be special. I mean, these fights are gonna be special. I'm looking forward to it. On paper, this has potential to be one of the greatest cards of all time. So I'm hoping it delivers. I don't see how it doesn't. So yeah, looking forward to sitting back watching it and making some money on it, hopefully as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some fights on here that are can't misses. I mean, we've got Max Holloway fighting Justin Gaethje. So what we're going to start here is we've got 3 5-round fights on the cards. I'm sure most of you guys know Alex Pereira, Jamahal Hill. We've also got Yao Nan against Zhang Weili, and then of course Justin Gaethje against Max Holloway. So looking at those 3 title fights that we have here, Brady, who is your highest priority favorite to be getting to for DraftKings purposes?
Yeah, my highest priority favorite is going to be Zhang Weili at 9,200, just because I feel like her path to victory here is going to score just incredibly. She's a minus 500 favorite here, and I feel like she can look minus 500 with the right game plan, and I think the game plan is going to be getting this fight down to the mat. She's taken on Yan Xiaonan, who's a great striker, and on the feet, yeah, this fight's probably competitive. It's just once this fight does hit the mat, I think it's going to be one-way traffic. Yan Xiaonan, once she has been taken down, she has not looked good on bottom. And Zhang Weili, she absolutely has the ability to get it there multiple times. So I think Zhang Weili at 9,200, she has a ton of takedown upside, control time upside, and a ton of strike upside as well. I mean, she went out there and put up 1,000,000 points against Amanda Lemos. And I think she could do something similar here, if not actually go out there and get the finish in this one as well. So Zhang Weili, 9,200. I actually think she has one of the highest, if not the highest ceilings on the slate when you factor in the 5 rounds, when you factor in the takedowns, the control time. I think Zhang Weili in a win puts up a monster score here.
I agree. I prefer her to Bo Nickel as a spend up option, not just because she's a few $100s less expensive, but also, like you had said, it's the way that she was going to win this fight. Like, I don't think she just gets one takedown and finishes Yan Xiaonan immediately or anything like that. I think it's more going to be rinse and repeat takedowns. The only thing that I'd be a little bit concerned about is, will she come into the fight with the right game plan? But the reason I do think that is going to be the case is we've already seen her in some of these similar sorts of matchups recently come in with good game plans. Like you mentioned, the fight against Amanda Lemos, she landed 6 takedowns in that fight. She also had a knockdown in that spot. But considering that we saw her in a matchup where she had a very similar path to victory against Lemos, and she went out and implemented the game plan we would have liked her to do, I think that we should see her do it again. In the fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the rematch, also in that fight, she landed 3 takedowns. It was totally dominant in the first round of that fight before she ended up getting the finish in the second round. So since we've seen it out of Zhang Weili multiple times in recent fights where she's prioritized the wrestling and grappling a little bit more, I don't know why she would get away from it in this matchup. And assuming that she does stick to the wrestling and grappling, we could see her put up 140, 150 fantasy points again. So I like her. I also prefer to Bo Nickel on the high end, which I assume a lot of people are going to be gravitating towards Bo Nickel because he's like a minus 10 billion favorite or some absurd number at this point. Other side of this, Brady, who's your favorite value option of the 3 5-round fights?
Yeah, for me, it's got to be Max Holloway. I mean, this card's wild because there's a couple fighters on this card where you look at it from a DraftKings perspective and you look down low and you see like some of these guys down here at these prices. Like Max Holloway, 7,400 is kind of wild. Like I get he's coming up a weight class here. Justin Gaethje hits very, very hard, but I can see a scenario where Justin Gaethje maybe lands some big shots early, maybe even hurts Max, maybe even is the first person to knock down Max, but as the fight goes on, I think that volume can definitely help Max Holloway, the cardio as well, the durability. Like Max Holloway's one of, if not the most durable fighter in UFC history. This is a guy that's absorbed well over 2,000 significant strikes, never been knocked out, and never even been knocked down. And like I said, that might change here, but just seeing somebody like Max Holloway, 7,400, who is like one of the best DraftKings scorers out there with the amount of volume this guy brings to the table. 25 minutes to work with. Even in a loss, like for cash games, like if Max Holloway goes out there and loses a 5-round decision, he's probably racking up, 150 significant strikes, if not more, over the course of 25 minutes. So in a win, Max Holloway at 7,400, I think has a very, very high upside here. So Max Holloway would be that guy for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I was really strongly considering betting Max. The price had gotten to be really wide. Have you seen the line movement today? It's
All in favor of Max
Yeah,
lately
it's
here.
getting close to a pick 'em now. So I do think Max is going to end up getting pretty popular for DraftKings purposes, as he should. And I feel bad that I missed out on like the plus 180, plus 190 price tag because I was really close to pulling a trigger on it. And then look this morning at the odds, like, oh my God, it's totally gone. It's really getting close to a pick 'em. And that's the way it's trending as we get closer to the fight here. Another thing to consider as well, with the amount of bigger favorites that we have and kind of the lack of underdogs that I feel good to pick here, if we do see a big score out of Zhang Wei Li, if maybe we see a big score out of Bo Nickel, there's a scenario where Max loses, puts up like 60 to 70 fantasy points in a loss, and could still land in an optimal lineup for this slate. So, considering what his price point is, I'm going to be having him as my most rostered underdog, not just amongst the 3 title fights, but on the entire card as a whole of any fighter who's sub 8K. And I do think that Max Holloway is much more live than the initial line indicated. The public generally seems to agree as well, considering the line movement that we're seeing here. But there's this narrative that Max Holloway doesn't have the power to keep up with Justin Gaethje, which I understand to an extent, but keep in mind the matchup that he had against Dustin Poirier at 155 pounds. Max took that fight, one, on short notice. Two, he was also still the belt holder at featherweight. So he didn't really put on a lot of size for that matchup. I think because he was expecting he was going to have to cut down again. Max looks much bigger now. And I think he's much better situated to fight at 155 pounds. If there's a finish in this fight, yeah, it's more likely to be on the Gaethje side. But how can you pick somebody to knock out Max Holloway, considering the durability he's had? For all the people who are concerned about, like, is this going to be the downfall of Max? I have more concerns about the durability of Justin Gaethje at this point in his career than the durability about Max Holloway. So I'm going to be picking Max Holloway to win this fight, and also somebody I'm going to have a lot of exposure to in the low end as well. A ton of other great fights to target here, Brady. Are there any other particular matchups or fighters that are really high priority that you want to talk about for this card?
Yeah, another guy up top I really do like is Jaylen Turner, 8,900. This is a guy with a 100% finish rate. He's taken on Renato Moicano, and yeah, I like him in this matchup quite a bit. He's going to have a big height advantage, a big reach advantage, like he will in the majority of his matchups. And if Moicano's not able to get this fight down to the mat, I think he's in trouble. And I think Moicano's actually a really good striker, very underrated striker. It's just you can't go out there and strike with Jaylen Turner. This guy has the death touch. We've seen Moicano hurt on multiple occasions. We've seen him knocked out. So, yeah, Jaylen Turner, I think, is live for a early finish, first, second round finish. This guy has 14 wins. All 14 of those wins come in that first or second round, and we're not even paying 9K for him. So, yeah, I like Jaylen Turner quite a bit up top at 8,900. Another guy I do like up top with Zhang Wei Li.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I thought Moicano looked terrible in the matchup against Drew Dober. Like, I know he ended up getting the win, but anytime they were striking at distance, Moicano kind of looked like a fish out of water. He was hurt every single time Drew Dober touched him. And Dober's fairly dangerous, but Turner's even more dangerous than what Drew Dober is. He's also a lot bigger. He's a lot longer. He's not going to get into some of those situations like Dober did, where Dober was trying to initiate clinch situations. It was winding up on bottom as a result of that. So I'm agreeing with you. I think Jaylen Turner wins this fight, and probably by knockout as the most likely outcome. Another fight that I think could end up going a little bit overlooked on this card. There's a lot of weird injury history here between Yuri Prohaska and Rakic. So this could be a fight that people kind of stay away from. It's close to a pick 'em in the mid-range. We know Prohaska had the really long layoff last year due to the shoulder injury. Didn't really look great when he came back against Alex Pereira. And Rakic coming off the torn ACL, where we haven't seen him fight for a really long time. But just because of the fight style of Yuri Prohaska, more often than not, it is going to yield big DraftKings scores. And if there aren't that many fighters that we like to target for cheap, I like taking my shots on some of these mid-range fights that are a little bit higher variance. One of them being the matchup between Yuri and Rakic, where Yuri does land over 5 significant strikes per minute. And if there's a knockout in the fight, it could be from either side. I think it would probably be a little bit more likely on the Rakic side, just because Yuri has shown to be chinny in the past, and he's so aggressive and so defensively irresponsible. But if Rakic isn't able to knock him out, I don't know that he's going to be able to keep up with the pace that we see Yuri put out in some of his fights. Like, think about the fight that he had against Dominic Reyes, where he got the second round finish, lands 77 significant strikes. A big part of that was just Reyes fought very competitively with Yuri in the first round, and then he just got overwhelmed by the amount of pace and the pressure that Yuri put on him before he landed that devastating elbow. So I'm going to pick Yuri to win this fight, but it's a good one to target both sides of him, and I don't think it's going to be all that popular. So Yuri Prohaska, picking him to win in the mid-range there, and a good fight, I think, to target for DraftKings purposes. Are there any other spots you're liking, or maybe any other value options you have your eye on potentially?
Yeah, maybe we could talk about the whole card, honestly,
Yeah.
but I will talk about one fight that I think is going to go under the radar and going to be very low owned on either side that I think could be important. And it is going to also be in the mid range. It's going to be sandwiched between the Rakic Prohaska fight. It's going to be sandwiched between the main event, Pereira Hill, and it's going to be that Andrade Marina Rodriguez fight. Both of them are priced at 8,100. You take a look at Andrade. When Andrade is winning fights, like, she's scoring a ton of points, and that's kind of why I liked her a little bit when she fought Dern last time, because everybody was on Mackenzie Dern, including me. Actually, I thought there's a good chance Andrade was done. She was washed. Dern would take her down and sub her. But I also realized that if Andrade does win this fight, she's going to score incredibly, because when she wins, she scores incredibly. And what did she do? She went out there, she knocked down Mackenzie Dern like 4 times and finished her in that second round and broke the slate. So this is a spot where I don't think this fight as a whole is going to have much ownership. I think Andrade, it has a ton of volume, has a ton of power. I think she's live to finish Marina Rodriguez. And then on the flip side, Rodriguez has a ton of power in her own right. I like the knees, the elbows, and Andrade has been finished 9 times. She leaves herself open. I could see a Rodriguez finish as well. So I think this fight at 8,100 apiece, the winner could go out there and potentially finish at low ownership here. So that's one I would mention, just because I think it's going under the radar compared to these other like 11, 12 fights on the card.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Like, Jessica Andrade only scores well and wins. She doesn't have fights where it's like, hey, look, Andrade won and scored 60 fantasy points. It's output from wrestling, it's output from striking. So yeah, I see it the same way as you, as another fight that has a pretty high upside. Before we finish up here, I'll mention one more underdog that I think is live for the card, just because it is a little hard to find underdogs. But Jim Miller, I think, is more live for a knockout against Bobby Green than a lot of people are crediting him for. And the biggest reason that I think that Jim Miller is live for a knockout, other than the fact that Jim Miller's always been a guy who's live for early finishes, is Bobby Green is coming off just an insane beating against Jaylen Turner. The fact that Jaylen Turner and Bobby Green have the same turnaround from that knockout is completely nonsensical, because this fight, let's see, what was the date of this fight? The Dariush Sarukian card. Yeah, December 2nd. Only a few months ago, not only did Bobby Green get knocked out, but he took something like 80 unanswered shots while the ref just kind of stood there, watched, thought about his shopping list, considered what he was going to do later on in the night, thought about stepping in. Then he's like, all right, maybe it's time. Like, Bobby Green got knocked out, woke up by strikes, knocked out again. He got knocked out like 3 times over the course of the couple minutes that fight took place in. And it was such a bad beating that you have to be concerned about the durability of Bobby Green going forward. He's also been knocked out a few times in his career, Bobby Green. He's also older now. He's 38, he's 7. He's going to be turning 38 later on in the year. So just because of how bad that beating was, and also the early power that Jim Miller has, I'm concerned about the durability of Bobby Green going forward. I think Jim Miller is live for a knockout in that spot. Not confident enough for me to pick Jim Miller outright to KO Bobby Green, but it's a live enough possibility that I'm going to be prioritizing Jim Miller, probably one of my favorite sub 8K fighters, and maybe the one I end up with the second most exposure to behind Max Holloway. Do you see Jim Miller as being live for a knockout in this spot here, Brady?
Yeah, I think he's live, and he's my preferred play in the fight because I could see a scenario where Bobby Green just goes out there and he's the better striker. He's picking apart Miller at range for 15 minutes. But yeah, if there's a finish in this fight, I think it's much more likely on the Miller side. You know, there's question marks with the durability of Bobby Green and Miller, although does not hit anywhere as near hard as like a Dober or a Turner, Jim Miller still does hit very hard. And you know, Bobby Green with that hands down style. Miller, I think, is live for a knockout, live for a club and sub. And yeah, 7,600. He's one of my favorite dogs as well, up there with Holloway. I think Charles Oliveira is a very intriguing dog as well. There's some very intriguing dogs this week with big names, and Miller's certainly one of them.
And that is going to do it for us here, guys. If you could do us a big favor, follow both our channels. That's Stochastic as well as DFS by the numbers. Like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. We really do appreciate it. Also, enjoy the card. It's going to be a hell of a one this weekend, UFC 300. So hope you guys enjoy. Check out all the other content that Brady's going to be doing on his channel this week. On Friday, I'm going to be doing a breakdown using our Sims tools and going over all my exposures for the fights. We're also going to have a deal going on where you get 30% off for UFC 300 if you guys want to sign up for that. So go check out all of that. Enjoy yourselves this weekend. Enjoy the card. Peace out. Good luck this weekend.
See you.